So almost all of my recent reads have been fantastic. And in a hope that this will continue, we're going to predict some 5-star reads. But instead of just picking some books willy-nilly, I did watch Sid Bookworm's recent video on very specific 5-star predictions, and she did some prompts for her 5-star predictions. So I'm going to take her prompts and we're going to apply it here. And I will leave the link to her video in the description below, so go check it out. And the first prompt is a 5-star prediction because I loved another book by this author. And for this one, we have 2. Starting with Rob J. Hayes. And I'm pretty sure I've said this in a lot of recent videos, but I'm a big fan of his War Eternal series. And just recently, he did a Kickstarter for his new God Eater saga, which I backed the Kickstarter and I'm hoping to get the physical soon. I do have the ebook on my Kindle already. And he said that he's been working on these books in the background for years. And it's such a unique concept. What he's doing is he is releasing 3 trilogies in different parts of history concurrently. So you're getting the first book in each trilogy, and then the second book in each trilogy, and then the third book. It's crazy, but it sounds super creative and a lot of fun. And anything that has magic to do with eating angel flesh, that just sounds cool. And what I really liked about his War Eternal series was his character work, especially with Eska. So I'm looking forward to seeing some new and interesting characters from Rob. Next on up, we have Blood Over Bright Haven. Now, I loved The Sword of Kaigan. I read it at the end of last year, and I had an absolute blast. It's one of those books that I kept hearing amazing things about, and I eventually got around to reading it and fell in love, and I can see why there's so much hype around this book. And I've heard her newest book, Blood Over Bright Haven, is just as good. It was self-published and then it just got picked up by a publisher and is being republished, I believe, in October with this new cover, which I think is really cool. I do prefer more illustration-based covers, but I do really like this minimalist look of this Blood Over Bright Haven cover. This is a dark academia epic fantasy with an order of mages, secret conspiracies, and much like Sword of Kaigan, it is a standalone. There aren't enough standalone fantasy books. I love a series. However, it is a lot of fun to have a one and done, just not to clog up too much of the TBR. And the next prompt is a possible 5-star prediction with an author that I didn't love their previous work. So the first book on this list is the Temeraire series. I've heard really good things about this Dragon Rider series. I know it's a lot of people's favorite Dragon Rider fantasy, and I do love Dragon fantasy, but I did read A Deadly Education a couple years ago and I DNF'd it. There was a lot of info dumping and exposition right at the start of the book, and that kind of bothered me, so I ended up putting it down. I thought I might go back to it, but I've just not been drawn back to it. Which is a shame, because I actually quite like the character work and also the setting. This idea of a school that is constantly testing the people who are in it is a really cool concept, but there was one passage, I think it was the main character talking about her past, and instead of living through the past with her, it was just kind of told as she thought about it and went through it, and it just felt so unnatural and jarring and very exposition heavy. But I keep hearing how good Temeraire is, so I probably will try Temeraire, and I'm hoping I will enjoy it. And it has the potential to be a 5-star. I don't like writing off an author because of one bad book or one book that didn't personally work for me, because I know there are some authors that have series that are very different from one another. Mark Lawrence is a good example of this. He's got the Prince of Thorns series. It's like a grim dark, follows this sort of psychopath character, and then there is The Book That Wouldn't Burn, that's probably more literary fantasy in a way. I've also heard Spinning Silver is quite good by Naomi Novik, but I think Temeraire is more likely to be up my street. Next up is Poppy War. Now this is a grimdark fantasy trilogy. I read Yellowface by R.F. Kuang last year, and I'm not going to say I didn't like it, it just didn't make me want to immediately jump into her other work. There was actually so much I loved about Yellowface. I loved the thriller aspect. I loved the tone of the book. It was such a fast read because of how it was written. The prose was so clean, and the character was fascinating to get in her head, and the plot was winding and always interesting. The thing that bothered me with Yellowface was a certain aspect of the story that felt like it was going in a certain direction, and it just kind of fizzled out and just came to nothing. It just felt like a loose thread, and I didn't like the ending. It didn't feel very interesting. It didn't pull lots of threads together into this wow moment. It was very much just a, oh, okay. Which was a shame, because I did have a good time with the book. However, I've heard really good things about Poppy War. It sounds a lot more up my street. It is fantasy, whereas Yellowface is literary fiction. Horrific, grimdark, character-driven war trilogy? Yes. Next up, we have 5-star predictions based solely on their covers. Let's do this. First up, we have a recent pickup, which is A Time of Dragons. Now, look at that cover. It's just so pretty. I'm easily sold. If a cover has dragons, I'm sold. That's it. That's all you need. No, but I am really interested in this book. I have read the synopsis, and it sounds incredible, very classic fantasy. But the first thing to draw me to this book was definitely the cover. I love the purple. I did say sometime last year that we don't have enough purple fantasy covers, and there seems to be an influx this year, which is great to see because I love purple fantasy book covers, and I think they look great. And it is a beautiful wraparound cover too. And this edition has really nice edges, which you can get at the Broken Binding. Next one up, we have Elements of Time by Sam Paisley. Now, the first time I saw this cover, immediately I thought, yes, I want it, and I want it now. This is absolutely stunning. The artist is Jeff Brown, who is an incredibly talented artist. He also did The Silver Blood Promise, which is also a beautiful piece of art. I mean, if you Google the definition of cool, it's just going to come up with this cool perspective, a castle in space with a force field and a floating wizard and two, I'm guessing, the main characters. And also, if you look really closely on their shoulders and in the air above this other character, there are animal companions, and just all the magical aspects look really good. This is, I believe, an urban fantasy book that moves into this sort of sci-fantasy epic. What more can you want? So I can't wait to pick this up very soon. This last one might be a bit of a cheat, because it is an omnibus of the Threadlight trilogy. The original covers do look really good, but this omnibus leatherbound edition is just absolutely stunning, and I cannot wait to read this book. Or books, because this is a bind-up of the entire trilogy. Now, I did have the Threadlight on my TBR before I got this edition, but since I've got this edition, it shot up in the TBR because the cover is so beautiful. This is a self-published trilogy that is for fans of Brandon Sanderson. I've only heard amazing things about it, and even the interior art on this looks absolutely stunning. And Zach and Hillary, who is Bookborn here on YouTube, are just some of the nicest people you will meet. They're just so supportive of the entire self-published and indie space. Next one up, we have 5-star predictions based solely on the vibes. So just kind of the general feeling you get from a book. Now, the most obvious one here for me is Mushroom Blues by Adrian Gibson. As soon as I saw this cover and heard the premise, I was immediately sold. If you've been following the channel, you know I'm a fan of cyberpunk books, and I do like murder mystery. In fact, recently I've just really got into murder mysteries. So the fact that this is a cyberpunk murder mystery with mushroom people in this Tokyo-inspired cyberpunk city. You know when it sounds like a book is written just for you? That's what this book sounds like, especially my current reading. So I'm not sure I have space on the TBR, but we might sneak it in sooner rather than later. And the next book I want to check out just solely on the impressions and feelings I get from the series is quite a big one. Malazan Book of the Fallen, or Malazan, I think is actually how you pronounce it, but I'm still going to call it Malazan. This is a huge 10 book for the main series, but then there's books further than that. Grim dark fantasy series. This absolutely huge, especially recently with Broken Binding doing new editions. But Malazan is one of those series that you just hear about all the time, and the thing that really draws me in is the expansive world, but equally how good the character work is. One of the things that kind of put me off when I first heard about Malazan was how confusing it is and how expansive it is, and I thought that sounds really interesting, but I'm worried that it's too watered down and focused more on politics and character work. But from the reviews and reactions I've seen, I misinterpreted this completely. My friend Francisca, who's over on Instagram under Witch King Reads, she's also an author and wrote Isla's Reach, which is fantastic, has been working through the Malazan series over the last year and a bit, and watching all her reactions has been a joy. And I have not even read the books yet, but seeing someone that passionate and involved with the series, it makes me want to be part of it as well. And anything that's traumatizing and does a lot to a person who is reading it emotionally, I'm here for. See? I'm not going to wear this, so it's too hot. And the last prompt is 5-star predictions based on just other things you have heard from other people. So I guess Malazan could technically fall into that too. However, we're going to look at some other books. First up is probably the biggest sci-fi series that's currently hyped up, which is Sun Eater. This is everywhere currently, with Patrick and Daniel both reviewing it and loving it. The fact that there was a Kickstarter for the first book, the fact that the first book you can't find in hardcover anywhere, and then they just started reprinting the first book in hardback, and Broken Binding are doing special editions of the Sun Eater series. So there's so much going on with the Sun Eater books right now, and I believe we have one book left until the whole series is done. So just the general reaction and hype around this series has made me want to jump into it so badly and just toss my TBR out the window. I've stayed strong and not yet, but I do really want to read Sun Eater. It sounds like a series I'm going to love. A sort of huge space opera epic. People compare it to Name of the Wind, which is a series I love. And again, it seems to draw out a lot of emotions in its readers. It seems to be very emotional read, especially once you get, they're talking about it on the Discord. 3 books in. I believe one of them in particular is particularly heart-wrenching, which I'm always here for some heart-wrenching fantasy and sci-fi. And also just to read more sci-fi in general. I read a lot of fantasy. However, sci-fi always seems to slip just out of the TBR. So I feel like this is a great way for me to get back into reading more sci-fi. That being said, there is another staple in the fantasy space that I've not read yet. Is huge and gets talked about a lot, and that is the First Law trilogy. Now this is huge, and I hear about it everywhere and how good it is, and it just sounds like it'd be right up my street. Humor, dark, character-driven. I'm sold. And this falls in the other category because it's probably the series I most get badgered about not reading. I'm looking at you, Ross and Laura. However, this is one I believe will be a 5-star read because it just sounds right up my street. And I am planning on fixing this very soon. Probably next month. I will probably start First Law in June. Also, going by the comments on the TBR video, I will be listening to the audiobooks because I've heard Stephen Pacey is amazing, so I'm looking forward to checking those out. And this last prompt, I'm going to ask you guys, what do you think in the comments below? Leave me a book that you think I will rate 5 stars. Based on my reading, give me some 5-star predictions. Trauma Club merch is only available until the end of June. I have a book out, and I have a prequel novella coming out in June. I think that's all the plugs I had to do. Great. Thank you very much for watching. Outro.